Well, good morning, guys and gals. 'Tis I, Professor Ludwig von Fartpants. A lot of you who, watch my silly little channel, have probably seen that we had something very, kind of an anomaly happen here, we had a confrontation with the Game Commission. I'm going to go over some of that, and so people can be kind of informed about how it all went down. I'm going to try and be brief because I've got quite a bit to go over here today, and I don't want to be on here for forever and bore you to death. I think I've got some pretty important information to share. I'm going to try and start on what happened. Opening morning was Saturday. So we had 7 hunters come in from Michigan who all paid out-of-state tags, out-of-state licenses, which I guess are like $120, plus their fuel, transportation. They stay here, but they all contribute. My house is like a camp. I've said that before. Last 2 years, I haven't got a license. I'm just not that interested in hunting anymore. Just not a big deal to me. But anyway, I love having my friends in. We eat well, we get together and share. My brother and his wife come in from Rhode Island, so again, out of state. They spend a lot of money here in the community, buying things and going to restaurants while they're here, yada yada, sporting goods. I think it's a very healthy situation for our local economy. So what happened Saturday morning is Josh and his son had got their deer. They tagged out early. It was pretty early. I would say it was probably about 8:30. Josh was dragging them in and hanging them out here in the backyard, the 2 deer. And he did tag them. He tagged them with a bread tie, through a wire tie. And he did put them around the antler, which apparently in Michigan is acceptable. PA wants you to put them in the ear. And to his credit, one of the Game Commission guys that were up here did say, you could even use a safety pin so you don't damage it if you want to have the head taxidermied or whatever. Okay, that's fine. And a lot of our conversation, all of the conversation that morning was very civil, very cordial. They're not supposed to accept, but it was cold out, the wind was blowing, the snow was going straight at us out there. The only complaint was, hey, can you just fix that to the ear of the animal? Yep. Josh went immediately and got zip ties, put a slot in the ears, put the tag on, happy. Now, the older officer, Atwood, was, I think, much more all business, you know what I mean? A little bit of a chip. Nice enough guy. I don't have any personal vengeance towards him. I don't. I understand he's doing his job, right? Blah, blah. Okay. The younger fella, I think, was the apprentice or the deputy, learning, whatever. He was much more cordial and seemed to be much more agreeable and, maybe not quite so hell-bent in his conviction. You know what I mean? Whatever. It was a cordial event. Shook the man's hand. All of us did. Hey, okay, officers. Now, mind you, they had pulled into my yard, and this is going to become relevant later when we start discussing this curtilage stuff, okay, which I'll go into later. But anyway, just remember that curtilage. So they pulled in unannounced. I was in here in my jogging pajamas here, having a coffee and, watching the news and whatnot. And, somebody's banging at the door. All right. And most of all the hunters were out at stand. They were, still hunting. They were still hunting. So I went and answered the door, and Josh and his boy were out, attending to the carcasses, you know, and wash them off and whatnot, and you know, they had gutted them in the woods, but you know, they're preparing them to hang so we could process them. So whatever, two people milling around, and they came to the door, knocked. I answered the door. Hey, how you doing, officers? Went out on the porch. You know, I'm still in my lounging slippers and my PJs, you know, my jogging pants or whatever. Had a nice conversation with them. It wasn't heated. It wasn't nasty. They had looked across the township road and up onto the adjoining property, which my neighbor owns. And, oh, well, whose shanties are those? And they have some big, you know, I call them the beach towers. They look like lifeguard towers. Great huts, you know. I said, well, that's my neighbor, and I told him his name, and he's township road supervisor, great guy, you know. I said, they're not, you know, and, well, how do I get over there? How do I get up there? Now, this was the head cheese guy, right? And I says, well, I said, it felt to me like he was, like, pressuring me to say, oh, just run on down through the valley there and run up the hill. And I said, well, there's four-wheeler trails to get over there. It's a hell of a hike up that hill. It's a pretty big hill, mountain over there. It's not a mountain, but it's steep. I said, you know, there's a road over on a township road on the other side of the property. I said, and they have a gate. It's usually locked if they're in there, you know. I said, and you know, I didn't try and hold nothing back. I'm not trying to not tell them where it is. I probably should have just said, well, go find it yourself. But, I'm just, hey, you know. So, this is going to become important, too, later. Although I guess I understand the reasons why these things aren't settled like gentlemen, you know. So, anyway, I told him, well, the guy lives right in town down here. He's only a few miles from us. You can't tell me he doesn't know his way around here. And who knows how much he's been snooping around here or hunting around here. Come on, you know, whatever. Okay. I didn't just fall off the turnip truck. But anyway, I just was cordial. I said, well, the township road, Curtain Bottom Road, they have a access road into there, but it's usually locked. If they're at camp, they lock the gate. It's private property. You know, it's private property, I said, and they locked the gate. That's what I said. And he sounded like he wanted to go traipsing up through my property, and I didn't say, get out of here. I just made it clear that you'll have to go around and see if their gate's unlocked. Okay, see you later, guys. Everything went fine. My wife happened to be running out to Dollar General to get some bread and milk and stuff that we're using for camp here. And she said, well, I followed them out, and they turned off and went this way. Well, they didn't go far, because everybody on this road down here in the valley, in the hollow down here, had been stopped. You know, they basically barged in on everybody's hunt on this whole range down here in Holler, and it's, you know, a 1.5 mile area down through here, you know. So, a few hours later, now my brother had came in, and he owns the property. He bought the adjoining property of mine. He owns clear to this old railroad grade, which is a right-of-way. And he has his stand down there. He's got a climber down there, right at the edge of the old railroad right-of-way, right at the property lines, goes up through there. And we know the guy who owns the right-of-way, we always hunted it. He never had a problem. So that's all cool. There was no issues. So my brother comes in on his four-wheeler, parks the four-wheeler on his stand, gets in it, and he's got like a 300-yard shot in either direction if they come out of the woods and cross that right-of-way or go down on his property. He's got 27 acres right there below it, and he's up high. You can see it's a good spot. He's been hunting up there for years. So he comes up to the house, gets a coffee and an egg sandwich or something, and it was pretty late. It was, by this time, this first checks happened at maybe 9 o'clock, 8:30, 9 o'clock. I think it was probably closer to 9 o'clock by the time that was done. So this is later on This is probably maybe 1 or 2 in the afternoon. He comes up, gets a coffee, and I think there was biscuits or something. He grabs something to eat, runs back to his stand. Gets back to his stand and he calls me. He says, "Hey, Bob," he says, "those assholes are parked right in my shooting lane on this right of way." He said, "I don't know how they didn't see my stand. You know, it's a climber and it's right on a tree along the edge of this right of way. They parked right in the view where the deer come across." He was pissed. And if you'll hear in the video, the phone keeps ringing. He wants to know what's going on. He's like, I want to give them an earful. They've ruined my hunt. You know, I've spent a lot of money to come down here. You know, he to the tune of like 170 grand. He bought all the adjoining property around here to be able to hunt, you know. And anyway, so he was pissed, rightfully so. I get another phone call. One of the other hunters, one of my buddies from Michigan. "Damn, I think it's wardens. They're walking all around down here in the bottom." Now, my property across the street, my property has a pretty deep hollow down in there with a creek in it. And the deer love to come in there and they just go in there and hide, right? And if you do need to do a drive, you got to do it strategically because there's so many places they can blow up over to the neighbors. I love my neighbors, but we want to hunt deer too. So we have a mutual respect. You know, if they're shooting at one and they miss and it comes down on me, it's fair game. And if we blow one out over to their property by driving or whatever, and we miss, it's their fair game. You know, if it lands on the other guy's property, we're very mutual. We get along great. Come down and get it. You know, hey, I got to go down and get my deer. Come down and get it. You know, we won't shoot at you. We'll watch for you. Okay. That's all cool. Copacetic. Been that way for 30 years. Okay. So anyway, but the deer do come down into that hollow, all the way down that hollow down there, and they lay because it's good cover. It's briars. There's a creek down there they can drink. There's food source in there for them, acorns, blah, blah. So they come down in there. Okay. So this is kind of important too with what happens later. I get a call. "Hey, 2 of the other hunters. These people are roaming around. There's 2 of them. They're roaming around down here, you know." And what they had did is parked on the right-of-way, walked up and went across my neighbor's property to where the stands were and warned them. Now, this part of it, he could have been a prick and did all these citations. And I give him credit. He used discretion. But what pisses me off is the attitude, we're just going to tramp anywhere, posted, unposted, doesn't matter, and we'll get into that in a while. Anyway, he goes down around onto another property and then up the bottom of mine, all right? And he comes up into my property like 250 feet by the time I got over there, or 250 yards, I don't know, 500-600 feet, up into my property now, in the bottom that we're trying to let set, and we've got stands watching this. So they're roaming around in there. So I get another call. Josh's brother, Jamie. "Hey, man, there's 2 wardens down here, you know, roaming all over the place." I said, all right, I've had enough of this shit, you know. So I jump on my 4-wheeler. There's one specific path that goes down through and up over. I get on there and go up, and there they are, hiking up the hill to the other stand. And this is where this confrontation on the video starts. And I was pretty heated. I apologize for my language. I did not call them names or personally attack their character, but I was pretty hot. You know, I used some pretty strong adult expletives. I was freaking hot. You know, my friends are all calling me. You know, like my brother says, "This is ridiculous. I'll just go home and hunt. These people are a pain in the ass." You know. I said, I get it. You know, after I spent the money down here, you know, guys are pissed, especially on opening morning, man. Come on. So the confrontation starts. I'm like, "What are you doing roaming around here?" By that time, they had been here. They might have left for a little bit, but they were here. Now, this started all about 8:30 in the morning. This was, I'm thinking, 2 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So they had been here literally 3 or 4 hours, roaming all over the place, me and the neighbors, but they were on me for quite a while. So the confrontation happens. You heard it, you know. their argument is, well, we have open field doctrine. And I had heard of it, but I really wasn't that well versed in it. And you heard me say, like, well, the Constitution is the Constitution. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. The Fourth Amendment pertains to private property, illegal search and seizure, So I throw that at them. Well, I'm not doing that. And you'll hear Josh was filming for me, and you'll hear him say, what do you mean you're not? Well, we're not seizing anything. Well, no, wait a minute. It's search and seizure. You are searching. Oh, no, we're just walking around. So this is the kind of bullshit that you hear from these people. It's like, be a man and fess up, And I says, my big problem with this was the big thing was to go up and get 100 inches. Basically, an orange cap would suffice, or a little small traffic cone or whatever. And that's not, people misunderstand. There's been a few people in these comments, well, you should know the law. They should have locked you up and ticketed you. First off, it's not a law. Okay? It's not a law. There's no law. It's a safety violation. It's not a law. So the nitwits that can't figure out that need to do some research. And I told them so. I answered a few people. So far, there's like 1,000 comments. And there's like 3 or 4 doofuses that apparently don't have any problem with their rights being violated. And the one guy I wrote a little nasty report back to there, he says about you should know the laws when you buy your property. Well, so when you buy a property, you're going to find out all of this minutia? Come on. No, you know that in the United States we have the Fourth Amendment. That's the law. Some stupid little these doctrines, and I'm going to go into that and where that came from. It's not hard to figure this stuff out. Anyway, it's a bastardization of our Fourth Amendment rights. There's no way around it, if, and, or buts. There's 15 states. There's 10 states that have overturned it, and there's a bunch more, including PA right now. Michigan just threw it out. As of January 1st, the game wardens will no longer have a free reign on private property. And you need to do a search. The Cato Institute, Law Institute, I was studying it yesterday, has done an extensive search or scientific tabling of protected land and unprotected land under this open fields doctrine. I would really, really, really stress you guys, and I'll point you in the right direction if I can. I mean, I'm going to try and get through a bunch of stuff. Research this stuff. Research what's being done to us, and not only in this hunting stuff. They're using this stuff for surveillance, for unwarranted. This and so you guys who think that, oh, you should just follow the rule. They should have threw the book at you. It's not about that. It's not about a couple $100 fine for not having an orange square on a hunting blind. Okay. It's not even about that. I don't have a big argument with that. Big deal. I'll throw up that's not the issue. The issue is our rights are being usurped and nobody says anything, but they just accept what they tell you. So I says to him, I said, well, wait a minute. I says, you're open field doctrine. I knew a little about it. And where it comes from is in 1924, it was implemented by the Supreme Court. What was his name? Oliver, I got it wrote down. Oliver Wendell Holmes was the head of the Supreme Court then in 1924. And what they did, it was a political move for the prohibition. It was absolute political pressure, and you can search this. I asked the search engine, the AI thing. I said, was there political pressure to pass this at the time? Yes, absolutely. Because of prohibition, and the government needed a way to easily, without warrants, illegally break the Fourth Amendment. and bash into people's properties. Now, some might say, well, the devil's in the bottle and good for them. And at the time, I'm sure it was a bunch of Christian, Quakers that wanted this devil banned. Okay, well, wait a minute. Again, this goes back to individual freedom and individual responsibility. We can't throw out our automobiles because two idiots don't know how to drive. And we're not going to do that with alcohol either. Obviously, it was all repealed. So I guess I feel pretty vindicated about that, and so does anybody else who has a brain. But that's what it was used for. That's how it started, okay? Had nothing to do with hunting. It had to do with the prohibition of alcohol and being able to raid stills on private property without reasonable suspicion and without probable cause and without warrants. So it was a go-around the due process, okay? So that ought to mean something to somebody. That ought to be very important to anybody, especially anyone who owns property, okay? So I start looking into this a little deeper. I said, I got to go in, because I told him, I said, that's just something somebody trumped up to bastardize Fourth Amendment. And you're building your whole case on this? You got to be ashamed of yourselves because people died for our Fourth Amendment and you're out here just basically shitting on it, And they kind of hang their heads a little bit. They know this isn't right. They just know. You want to sit on a township road, wait till the guys come out of the woods with the deer and check them. Fair game. What I don't understand is, as far as I'm concerned, private property is private property. If I want to kill every friggin' deer on my property, to my own detriment, that's my business. But now we get into legal concepts, and you'll hear me screaming about that on there too. Our laws are based in common English law and what's called Mosaic laws, the whole Judeo-Christian thing, basis of it. It's biblical stuff. And what is called Enlightenment philosophy, one of the founders was John Locke, and we'll get into that a little bit more too. And he brought in the concept, basically, him and Jefferson, in the Bill of Rights of individual freedom, the rights to privacy, the right blah, 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 blah. And we'll go into that a little bit. So, to me, and to anybody else who wants to logically think through this stuff, how far can this go in the name of public interest? We want to get rid of alcohol. Which, remember now, that whole thing was thrown out in, 1929? They repealed prohibition. So at the moment, it was the fervor. It was the political thing of the day. So we scrap our Constitution for a popular political opinion, or maybe not even so popular, because people still went to speakeasies, and you created this whole underground black market for alcohol. We can go on and on with this shit, So, but it's all repealed. Oops. Sorry. Oops, we made a boo-boo. All right, well, then go back and undo your boo-boo that you... Oh, no, we don't want to repeal the open fields doctrine. That'll come in handy. And that's exactly... I'm using layman's terms, but guys, that's exactly what they've done. Now, all this drug fields. Now, one douchebag wrote to me and said, it's about chronic wasting disease. Don't you understand the Game Commission is so concerned about chronic... And what if you put a food plot in and the deer came in and ate that stuff together and passed CWD around? Well, that's not my problem. That's not my problem. Why would that be my problem? Well, why would I care? If nature's going to take a bunch of them and thin the herd, I can't do anything about it. I don't have the money to send them to the vet, and neither does the public. It's just going to have to take its toll until they build up an immunity to it or whatever. And again, here's my view on all this. Leave private property alone. As far as I'm concerned, anybody on here don't need a license, because I don't need your help and I don't need your patrol. Stay off of my private property. The Game Commission is, I think, the largest landowner. They own millions of acres in Pennsylvania for hunting. A lot of people donate their farms, donate their property. I don't know why, but they do. to the Game Commission. The Game Commission buys a lot of property. They literally, we can look that up on another day too, but look it up. How much land does the Game Commission, Pennsylvania Game Commission, own? And it is open to the public. Now here's my theory on this. You bust your balls and you buy a piece of property and you take on the responsibility of a property, you know, and with that responsibility comes some stewardship. That's an old law too, you know. Take care of it. Don't abuse it, blah, blah, blah. All right, but that's, again, it's up to the individual, okay? So if the Game Commission owns, let's just say 1 million acres. I know it's huge amount of property they own. I know I've worked on a lot of their sales, timber sales. It's a lot of land. Here's my thing. If you are going to have the Game Commission owning property and allowing public hunt, then charge for that if you have to go up on the license, okay? If someone doesn't have private property, that's not my fault. That's not anybody's fault. That's not the taxpayer's fault, okay? Well, now it's up to the Game Commission to say, hey, look, here's our list of rules, okay? And if they want to make you wear pink leotards and, you know, stick the gun up your ass and dance naked upside down to get into your stand, and you say, well, I want to hunt deer so bad, I'm going to abide by your rule. Well, then that's fine. Now you have your toadies out there legitimately on their grounds, writing citations, which would really, 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 really stop a lot of this shit, because they'd know that if they push this too far, nobody's going to come buy your hunting licenses, dudes. Nobody's going to want to go on your property, the Game Commission's property, and be harassed while they're hunting, a recreational thing. So this would bring it back into a balance, counterbalance, I think. But because they're out here harassing rural people, oh, it's okay. But keep that all under its own domain. Right? You patrol all you want on your properties, you say, and fine. And if someone doesn't own property and they need to go to a public property to hunt, then they're going to have to abide by those set of rules if they agree to them. And you'd see then, I think, this nitpickery idiocy, you know, lessened a lot. Look, there's a few basic things we have to follow for safety and for, you know, treating the animals humanely and, you know, all that stuff. I get it. But you'd see all this, just it's just this endless list changed every year, and you have to read the encyclopedia they give you to know, oh, that this time change because of 3 lunar phases is changed by 30 seconds, and if you would have, I mean, just on and on and on and on. You're going to be a lawyer to read the book. Who reads it? Who? And these dopes on this page are, I bet you they don't read them all. And I'll bet you if they got stopped, they'd have something that they would nitpick and find them for too. So you people who have that attitude, it's not even about that. This is about much more fundamentally important things than 100 square inch, the size of a hunting hat now, on a deer blind. This is about much more than this. And these people can't seem to figure it out. I wrote one smart-ass comment back to one guy. I said, look, a lot of people get scalded in the shower. Why don't we have a water officer, a water temperature officer who can save you from yourself and, you know, just bust into your door unannounced with no warrant and run on in while your wife's having a shower and make sure the water's not too hot. I mean, it's the same scenario. It's like you people have no problem with abridgment of Fourth Amendment until it comes to your house. Which, okay, so that brings us to this curtilage area and the discussion of the curtilage. So what they're basing this on is the open fields doctrine that in rural areas, you can't expect the same consideration of privacy on open land, your pastures, your fences. Now, mind you, you can have fences, you can have gates, you can have posters, you can paint them purple, which means the same thing as posters. It doesn't matter. These guys just have the right to ramble right over that and crawl all over your land. There's cases right now being argued in Pennsylvania, and actually it went to the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. You want to look that up. It's Punxsutawney Hunting Club, which I've actually cut timber on their ground, sales, and Pitch Pine Hunting Club. I'm not sure where they are. But they're big hunting clubs with a lot of members, and they've challenged this now, and the Supreme Court heard the arguments, and it sounds as if we might get this all repealed where they can't crawl around by the first of the year. Michigan just did. They repealed theirs. So a lot of states, there's a bunch of states, research this stuff. You'll be fascinated by it. It's fascinating what they've done and how they've skirted around our Constitution to make it apply to unlawful search and seizure. It's not right. It's not good. And once that door is open, and it has been, and already led to many different avenues, it'll keep going, and that'll be used for something else. So people who are concerned about this stuff, concerned about our rights, really need to look into it, pay attention to it. So I'm going to cover some more of this. All right. So the curtilage, he mentions, well, your yard is your curtilage. I said, well, since we're going to use that as our benchmark here, define curtilage. And you heard him in the thing. You didn't do a very good job at it. Well, it's where you mow around your house. Really? I said, well, that's pretty arbitrary. I says, where I mow. Well, yeah, but and like your garage and your shop and your barn. And all right, so this is like, there's no benchmark to this. This is just whatever they want to call it at that particular case or that particular violation or fine. They're going to use this. They're going to move this goalpost all over the place. Okay, so there's really nothing to. But out here in the field, he says, what do you think I'm hurting standing here? I'm not hurting your property. Well, actually you did. You damaged a hunt, a legal, lawful hunt. But, all right, you claim you did that in the name of your job because you were worried about us with your 100 square foot patch. I'm not buying that for a minute. But, okay, let's use that. So I turned around to him and I said, so the rest of this property, on my Fourth Amendment, doesn't matter. I disagree in what? Well, I disagree with your assumption of that. How can you disagree with persons, papers, homes, and effects? Now, this is an important thing, too. We're going to go over this real briefly, kids. All right, effects. So, on and on, you heard the argument. I was heated. I wasn't very focused. I'm trying to get focused and get words. I think I was pretty good with my points and comebacks. But you heard that. What a mess. I mean, if that was a courtroom, I would have looked like the lawyer and they would have looked like doofuses. I think. You tell me how you feel. But I mean, I think I held my own pretty good under duress. And these people are saying, oh, that guy, he's just a Karen, bitch. Well, if we don't bitch about our human rights, our civil rights, what is there to bitch about? What? That the wrong team won the Super Bowl? Or, I don't know. Are our priorities as patriots in the United States that fucked up? I mean, what's important? This shit means everything to me. My dad fought his guts out in World War II to protect. Think about that. Think about your relatives and your families and your ancestors that died. Not just bitched and got their blood pressure up. They friggin' died for this, for our Constitution. And these people are willing to just... Well, what, you disagree with it? And you're part of a law enforcement? Basically, that's what he's implying. Oh, so I can go do my job and make my salary. Wow. All right, on to definitions. So I'm out there, and I'm stewing still. We left cordially. I told him 2 or 3 times to leave. Oh, what? Well, I'm going to call state police. Oh, here. He hands me his phone. You need a phone? No, mine's ringing in my pocket right now. I don't need a phone. And he did that because he knows he'll just go to the cops and the troopers and tell them, well, this guy's an agitator, he's an asshole, and they'll all lock me up and drag me away. That's what that's all about, okay? Well, and then the sheriff, which this man's father was the sheriff years ago. It was a long time ago. The older man was a state trooper and ended up running for sheriff. God bless his soul. And again, I'm not being rotten. I'm sure this Atwood man is a good man. I'm not advocating, and a few people have said about, oh, dig a hole. I mean, yeah, we all say that shit in the heat of the moment. I have too, but come on, they are our neighbors. I'd rather maybe convict them a little bit about thinking about this stuff and going back and saying, hey, look, we're going to look for gross violators. We're going to look at the road. We're going to stop at the road. We're going if a guy has a lot of people hunting on his ground, maybe we'll get his cell number and say, hey, Mr. Reynolds, you guys, how did you do in your hunt? Oh, yeah, okay. We'd like to come up and check. I don't really have a problem with that. And that was what I was making the point of, well, if you said to me on my porch, those guys need to put orange on, I would have called Rex and said, hey, Rex, I said this before, the Game Commission but it's not about that for this guy. It's about sneaking around and seeing what he can find, being snoopy. And I told him, I said, this is what people, this is why people can't stand you. Can't stand this, It's not that we're all unreasonable. We don't want some basic rules and laws. I'm not a friggin' anarchist. But the way you go about this, it needs to change. Because I'm telling you, look, you guys watch that. I've never had a video with 50,000 views before. And I never thought this was going to go almost like viral to me. Because you guys know my views are usually 250 people or something. Big deal, I don't care. But it's like, this has really struck a nerve. People are friggin' pissed, rightfully so. This is righteous anger. And I think this is how we move things. We get things moved along. I am going to personally write a pretty well-informed letter and maybe copy it. My brother and my neighbors are going to sign it. And we're going to move it on to our representative and maybe have some influence or some sway on this. And I encourage other Pennsylvania private landowners, you should look into this because the case is now in the Supreme Court. So maybe if we get letters to our representatives, and I know a lot of you guys are probably like, it's past that, we need to start shooting. Part of me feels that way too, okay? But if there's any semblance, any chance of doing this civilly through our system, let's try that first. And to be quite honest, guys, all of you guys who bitch just like I do, how much are we really, me included, I'm guilty. I'm not blaming anybody else. I'm not blaming some of the guys that I made pissy comments to. It's like, how much are we really investing in our voting system? Look at how many gun owners and hunters don't even vote. Don't even put their say in. Don't even put their name in the hat. And then bitch because things go the way they go. It's true. All right, so if we got more involved, if we maybe skipped the playoff game and sat down and wrote a letter for an hour to our representatives, why don't we try that first before we have to go, take drastic measures, come on, none of us want to see our neighbors and fellow Americans. We don't need that mess. There's enough mess going on now. Okay, I'm not saying it might not come to that because the other side needs to listen. This is not Karen whining as much as these few guys said, oh, he's a Karen. You could get bit. I'm not a Karen, dude. I've been a logger, self-employed logger for 44 years. I've been through a lot. Smashed, busted. I'm not a whiner. I do get pretty perturbed and mouthy when I need to. I get it. I'm guilty. But come on, this stuff's important. So maybe instead of, like these few people, dissenters, and I love you and I thank you for watching my channel. It's not personal with you either. Look into this. Maybe you'll find that old grumpy Karen wasn't wrong about this. If you take the time to look into it, and maybe it would even inspire you to say, hey, whoa, what's going on here? maybe he's got a point. Maybe these other 990 out of the 1,000, maybe they got a point. Maybe I ought to look at it, you know? Something to think about. Okay, so I want to know the Fourth Amendment. I'm going to just get it out. I wrote a bunch of notes, but I want to try and get this fairly accurate. All right, the Fourth Amendment, okay. Our Fourth Amendment, persons, houses, papers, and effects. All right, so that really doesn't say in your private property now, does it? And this was the gray area, effects, where in 1924 the court had a hard time deciphering or defining effects. Now, mind you, I've got a 10th grade education, okay? And it took me about 20 minutes to figure out what the original intent of effects were. The definition of effects in our Constitution, and this goes back to state constitutions, a lot of the state constitutions word it differently. They use possessions instead of effects. But when you look at the original intent, 18th century Old English language, effects meant property. So my brother and I are having lunch yesterday, and I said, Todd, we were discussing this and writing stuff down and looking stuff up. I said, Todd, do me a favor, look up effects and see what it pertains to. So the modern definition of effects includes, it's not conclusive that that's all it is, but it includes cell phones, automobiles, ATVs, boats, stuff like that. I'm not sure about the boats because of the water stuff that might, but you get what I mean. Oh, it's mobile stuff. It's all, like in other words, that's where the argument is, the cops have to get consent before they search a car. That's where that's coming from, the effects clause. I said, whoa, wait a minute. I said, that can't be original intent because there were no cell phones, ATVs, and automobiles. There were buggies and boats and manure wagons and lumber wagons back when the Declaration was signed, yes. So it would obviously extend to those too. So I wanted to know more. So I get looking the preambles and the foundation. Sure enough, possessions means a lot. And one of the very influential men, one Thomas Jefferson, the other was John Locke, and his contribution to the Constitution, Bill of Rights was, it's called Lockean philosophy. So John Locke's contribution was, it's called Enlightened philosophy. It brought the very personal end of it into life, liberty, effects, the illegal search of your home, your papers, and effects. Well, he says possessions. What did you mean by possessions? And it's clear as day. He explains that estates and property. Estate and property is also included in this. All right, so estate is obviously your whole worth. It would include your property. Remember now, if you go to probate court or you're dealing with the IRS, they don't exclude your property and your estate from your private property. So to be consistent, obviously the government recognizes your private property and your estate as your possessions. So there's no really legal way to worm out of this, okay? They've just went around it. Oh, well, we were confused about the effects. Basically, is what, like, well, that leaves it open. Now, go on to this Cato Institute if you want to research something interesting. I could have shared it, but I don't know how to do all that and show it on the screen. If I get better, somebody to help me do that stuff, we could do it that way, like a news program. But you can search it yourself. The Cato Institute has a big page on this, very interesting. I read the whole thing. It's probably 3 or 4 pages. And it talks about the importance of this, the robustness of this, and how it has been bastardized, So I encourage you to look that up on your own because I'm going to be running out of time here pretty quick. But the next thing is this open fields doctrine that was implemented in 1924 as a tool to get around the Constitution to search for stills and everything. And now, like I said, that's been expanded to include a bunch of other stuff. So that's what's being fought right now in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. I'm going to dig into that and find out where we're at that. Michigan just announced, with a lot of help from Ted Nugent, that they're throwing it out. The conservatives in the Michigan legislature have passed. They're doing away with this open lands doctrine. So Michigan's game wardens are going to be limited to, if they have suspicion, they can get a warrant and search, which is fine. That's the due process. But the Fourth Amendment clearly defines property as effects or possessions. And that's something that I thought was very important. I'd like to see you guys maybe look into it yourself. Don't take my word for it. This is real stuff. This is fundamental American civil liberty. And for you guys that think that we're some kind of outlaw, like I said, I don't even hunt. When I did, I'd go hunting for, a few hours. I just was never a big, not that I didn't do it. I like, a little bit of it, whatever. I do enjoy eating venison and whatnot. And them guys, they gave me a whole cooler full. We processed and cut it up here. I got enough venison for a year. I don't need to go, and I did say that in that video. If I'm starving to death, I don't care about your game commission bullshit. The thing's on my property. Now, this is the other thing, too, that I want to mention quickly, is concept of law. If you look back into Mosaic law, Leviticus, and that's what I was trying to say out there in a heated moment. With ownership comes responsibility. And you'll see this reflected in law. If you own an automobile, you got to have liability on it because if you damage somebody else, right? The same thing goes down to a cow or a dog. If my dog gets out and runs into my neighbor's yard and rips up his screen doors and chews on his woodwork and rips down his porch swing or whatever, stuff like this happens. Well, this is the concept that says if you own that dog or that car or whatever you own and it damages someone else, then you are liable. Responsibility, right? You're responsible for that, which is a legal concept. Now, here's something to ponder, guys and gals. How is it that the Pennsylvania State Game Commission basically the Commonwealth has claimed ownership of the wildlife? Okay. Did you claim any responsibility for the damage it does? Oh, no. No. You can't blame us. That's an act of God. Isn't that funny how that works? For the rest of us, if we back out of the Walmart parking lot and bang into somebody, we're legally responsible. Oops, gotta fix that. If I drop a tree on the power lines, oops, I gotta fix that. If I drop a tree on your porch while I'm cutting a tree, I'm legally responsible. I have to either have insurance or be able to pay for it, the damage. So why is it any different than for them? This is really, ask yourself these questions. If you claim ownership of something, the law demands that you take responsibility for it. You bear financial responsibility when it damages something, or if it damages something. And think about that. Think about that on the roadways out here. Thousands and thousands of deer get hit by cars out here, and it does a tremendous amount of damage. Even to the point where a lot of people, the insurance companies want more go tags, and pressure the game commission to put up more deer to get rid of these deer and cut the population because it's killing them, fixing all the cars, which is probably some truth to that. I don't know. That's kind of a conspiracy. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me. But you guys can think about that. But just think about that theory, or that concept, and then go back and study some of this stuff if you don't believe me. Just Google the Constitution, Fourth Amendment, PA's Constitution, was intended to be more robust than the Fourth Amendment. And actually, it's worded instead of effects. The PA Constitution uses possessions, which translates directly into estate and property. So these guys are all basing this on this foggy, and I knew enough about that just to say that. So, all right, I'm going to let you guys go. This thing's going to run out. Ta-ta, love you. Like, subscribe, and share, and pass this stuff around. Thanks.